Jim Fox, the chairman of the planning board, and thank you all for coming. Tonight is a presentation of the Davis Straits Visioning Plan. And it's a long report. First thing we're going to do is show you how to go get it at home and read it yourselves and be for the future. This is a 50-year plan. This is not something that's going to happen next year. What we want to do is reach out to the stakeholders in the community and get an understanding of what some of the ideas that's come up for this plan. So the first thing is I want to show you all where to find this plan yourself. If you go to the Falmouth Planning Board, Falmouth Town website, on the planning board, this is the new town website. You come to the planning board page, and you come down to right here, the Davis Straits Draft Report. It's a 60-some page report, so we're not going to attempt to go through the whole thing tonight, just give a quick overview and reach out for, this is the stakeholders' comments. And there'll be many of these meetings. So this is a study that was done by the Cape Cod Commission. We have tried to leverage the money that the Cape Cod Commission takes from our town for many different reasons and get them to focus on the things we need. So one of the things we came up with as part of our local comprehensive plan was this idea of revisioning of Davis Straits. So we asked them, we first showed them our goals in our local comprehensive plan, and we asked them to put together this visioning plan. And so, Pat, if you would, I'd like to touch on first our local comprehensive plan, the policies, and our land use section.
Okay. As Jim mentioned, the impetus for this came out of the local comprehensive plan and our discussions with the idea that there are certain areas that are ripe for redevelopment. So the local comprehensive plan in the land use goals states that Falmouth shall use land appropriately to create places to live, work, and play by encouraging sustainable and balanced growth. And then there were policies that were adopted also by town meeting. Policy number 1, Falmouth shall continuously analyze the zoning rules that guide development to ensure that they are flexible, fair, and innovative to improve the quality of the public streetscape. Policy number 2, Falmouth shall thrive and grow by guiding development into convenient and pleasant villages suitable for the 21st century, balanced with large reserves of open land. Policy number 3, Falmouth shall encourage a high-quality and durable built environment that respects the culture of the community. Policy number 4, Falmouth shall provide for a comprehensive network of access corridors to accommodate many modes of travel. Policy number 5, Falmouth shall encourage increased density, primarily through redevelopment in some areas and discouraging further development in others. Now, with these local comprehensive plan goals and policies, the Cape Cod Commission put forth project goals. The first one is to identify unique features of the area and ways to differentiate character from surrounding areas. The second one, develop a recommended land use plan for street fronting properties along Davis Straits / Route 28, acknowledging unique measures for small lots with individual properties and for larger commercial plazas within the study area. And the third goal, recommend implementation tools, including zoning changes and other efforts to protect the unique characteristics of the area and to facilitate development and redevelopment consistent with town goals.
Okay, this is an area on the history of the site. There's some structure that have been there for a long time, and our idea is to probably keep some of those buildings starting off on the street, some along the same. So there are some historic uses, some smaller residential uses that we would like to consider retaining. When you look at the plan, this is hard to see in the screen, but these are screens of what over the last 100 years, how this land looked. And you really need to study it on your own and not really see it here tonight, but it's all part of the plan. What we're focusing on is the existing conditions. So you can see the scope of our meeting. Jones Road is up here. This is the Falmouth Plaza. This is Main Street coming into it. And this is up where the CVS is coming up along Davis Straits. So this is the area we focused our discussion on. I know I'm moving through quickly, but we want to just touch on a few areas. Right. Most of this area right now is Zone B2. And in order to make changes to it, I don't know if we're going to change the zoning, create an overlay district, or somehow, if we don't plan for the future and have some kind of vision of what this area is going to change, it's going to just happen by itself. And we think there's some planning that needs to be done. This is an example of some of the built environment we have now. We have some very typical old Falmouth structures right along Davis Straits, and some of these along the streetscape we would like to keep. And then we also have a giant plaza that's just nothing but acres and acres of pavement and buildings set back so far. And this is the area we'd really like to focus on and see if there's a better way to use this land. Okay. We have the overall vision. It's important that we have a pedestrian scale. You have that, Pat? Go ahead.
The Davis Straits area will be a comfortable place for residents to live, work, and shop, characterized by 1, pedestrian scale development, 2, a variety of commercial and housing types and sizes, 3, an affordable mix of commercial space, residential options, and goods and services, and 4, safe roadways with pedestrian and bike amenities, reduced visual clutter and curb cuts, and increased tree cover and landscaping. And from that, you can see how this plan works into the local comprehensive plan policies.
So this really gives you an idea. What we're talking about is right now we have major thoroughfares, primary and secondary streets going through it. And what we're really talking about is, if you look closely, you can actually see a grid here. We're talking about putting in cross streets, both primary and secondary, with the primary streets having larger buildings, taller buildings right on the main road, and the secondary streets having some mixed use and residential properties behind them. But in all cases, we're looking at putting the parking in the rear of the buildings, so that when you drive through this area, you see the fronts of the buildings, streets you go down, and the parking in the rear, not an ocean of parking and giant big box buildings, 100 yards in the background. We feel that, and actually the numbers show, I'm not going to go into tonight, but if you look at this report carefully, it actually shows that the value of these properties is much greater. Instead of having giant parking lots, having actual buildings and smaller parking lots and mixed use. One of the reasons why this is an area that's already on the sewer, it already has public transportation coming through it, and it's a major thoroughfare and to our town, and everyone that comes into our town drives through this right now, and we're trying to change the look a little bit. One of the things we did is look at the streets, and one of the things we've done, the planning board's always looked at kind of having a complete streets concept. That when we look at long-range planning, we want to have pedestrian ways for cars, some trees, bike paths, and people to get through. and then and with the parking in the rear of all the buildings. And then we have secondary streets that are a little bit smaller and narrower, but still have some of the same concepts with bike paths and walking ways throughout the whole concept. This gives you an idea, at all times we're looking with streets with the buildings in the rear and parking in the rear. So here you can see some of the major streets. You have Davis Straits coming down through the middle, Worcester Court and Spring Bars Road. And if you look closely, you can actually see there's a grid pattern there that we're taking what now is just a massive parking lot area and redeveloping it with denser buildings, higher buildings, and parking in the rear. With a mixed use, with pedestrian walkways. That's a really, really important part of this concept. Is the idea is that people should be able to walk. Right now you drive through Davis Straits or walk through Davis Straits, you don't feel very comfortable walking along Davis Straits. It's nothing but parking lots and high traffic. We would like to see some more, the buildings brought closer to the street. So that, so when you walk by, and walking paths. Many of these areas are encumbered by the floodplain, and in the future, we could have a greatly different looking area. This is what this plan shows, and it's really pretty significant, is we're taking all the areas in this plan that would be in the floodplain, and we're actually going to turn them into parks or walkways in areas. And then one of the things we'd like to do is, there's a lot of property here, millions and millions of dollars worth of property, but our idea is to create a way to transfer the development rights. So if somebody has a building that is in the flood zone right now and possibly could get flooded out in the future, especially if there's sea level rise, that we should plan that those areas could become parks and walkways and areas that would be resilient to flooding, and moving the development with greater density on the properties just abutting them. And in the long run, it's the same amount of development. It's just moved away from the places that get flooded out to the places that are out of the floodplain. So that's kind of where this vision's coming from, is that now, if you look along here, you can see this is really important. There is, what is it, the McMahon plan that is not too far away from actually starting. They're actually working on the design of the Rotary right now. Here's Main Street coming down. I don't know if you can see that, but this is important. So we got Main Street right here coming down into the area. And this you can see right now, here's the Gus Canty Center. There's a big hotel and some other buildings here. This is a retail section here with all kinds of buildings. And our vision is, and there's also a hotel here, and here's Falmouth Harbor. Our vision is that you would come down Davis Straits, come around this rotary. This would all be parkland that's currently in the floodplain. And we would move the density from these areas to all the surrounding areas. So the same amount of development would be there. It would just be moved out of the floodplain and into areas that won't flood. And that when you make this turn onto Main Street, you would actually have a view right down to Falmouth Harbor. So this would be like we have a town green on one side of the harbor coming in. You have a beautiful old village, which we've had great success with our development of Main Street. Our Main Street has become probably envy of just any town on Cape Cod, with the amount of people and pedestrians and traffic and the business that's going on. It's getting better and better all the time. We would like to put some planning and some hard work into making this be the other end of Main Street and really creating the same thing. Again, showing the harbor, and so as you come around this rotary, you're coming down Davis Straits, and you're going right here. This would be looking right at Falmouth Harbor. There'd be a connection to it, right there. This would all be green space, parks, an area with the development that's currently in this area transferred to other areas that are outside the floodplain. Yes? Oh yeah, this is a 50-year plan. We're not talking about doing this tomorrow, folks, okay? If we don't plan for this, it won't happen. So the idea of this plan is to have a long-term vision, put some kind of tools together for zoning, whether it be an overlay district or changing the zoning. There's many, many tools. But that ends incentives for people to redevelop some of their land. Part of this, we're envisioning that sea level rise is real, that we will be, if in fact we were to have a Hurricane Sandy type storm, these areas would all be seriously flooded. They're at 10 and 11 feet, and Sandy came in with 13 and 14 in New York City. Wall Street was flooded. There's lots of different things. So we're trying to put a plan together that will encourage the local landowners to reinvest in their property and create incentives and tools that will allow them to transfer some of their developments from the areas that are in the flood zone and more vulnerable to areas that are just outside the flood zone, and create a much better vision for our downtown. Some of the tools that we're talking about and these are way out in the future, but we're talking about maybe changing some of the way we do zoning. We're thinking of maybe putting an overlay district in this area, something called a form-based zoning, where we don't tell everybody this, we don't give a list of here's all the uses you could put in this building and here's all the uses you could put in that building. We want to say, here's the way the building should look. They should be built close to the street. They should be 25 to 35, in some cases maybe 40 feet high, no parking in the front, parking in the rear, and let the market kind of evolve and take care of that by giving them tools. And I think the greatest tool would be is if we created transfer of development rights, so that two different parties could get together and they could take all the development from one site, agree to maybe the town buys it, the CPC or some other function buys the land, but in that the people that own that, they could also take those development rights and transfer it to buildings along the perimeter that are just outside the flood zone, and totally redevelop it. This area, 100 years ago, this was farmland. No one really envisioned a giant parking lot 100 years ago, or all the things we have now. So we're really at the beginning of the next 100 years and saying, how are we going to do this for the town? And how can we create a plan and give the town the right tools in order to do that? And some of those tools will be things like transfer of development rights, maybe form-based zoning, where we just say, look, here's the size buildings you have to build, here's what they should look like, and you can put in them whatever you want. We're more focused on how the form-based zoning is more how the buildings look and how they relate to the environment, and not what's actually inside the buildings themselves. Our current zoning is all based on use. So we say you can do this, this, and this. So if we say this is the area we want fast foods, well, we get fast food. That's what we get. We would rather say these are the type of buildings and structures we'd like to have, and have them be built in quality construction outside the floodplain, and then kind of let the market figure out how to do it. Okay, so I just blew through a 65-page report in 5 minutes there. So I want to encourage everybody, especially any of the stakeholders that want to understand this view, to go to our town website, read this plan carefully. And one of the things that you'll see is it actually makes the land in total more valuable than it is now. What the Cape Cod Commission this plan has shown us, and I'm not going to go into the numbers because they're long and complicated, but the land is actually more valuable in the overall by getting rid of the giant parking lots and parking in the front and allowing, and taking some of the buildings away that are in the floodplain and setting them back a little bit, creating pedestrian ways and walkways, and creating a mixed use where people actually live. Right now, no one lives in there's a few houses in Davis Straits, but we would like to see buildings with second and third floor apartments on every single building. You know, with mixed use, with smaller stores, not 5,000 and 10,000 square foot stores, but 2,000 or 3,000 square foot stores owned by local people with smaller shopping, smaller streets, and able to drive through and park in smaller parking lots scattered through the whole thing. Not a massive piece of pavement that really only provides parking for the summertime when people are trying to go to Martha's Vineyard. This is a very valuable asset, and over the long term, I think we can really improve it. The report goes into, you can see all the kinds of details about the types of uses. We might get some uses that would be prohibited. For one of the things, we're not sure we want a lot of gas stations in this area, okay? We might say, we might have some, we don't want any automotive uses in this particular area. I think we really want to focus on retail, smaller retail, and mixed use development, lots of residents mixed in. And some of the things we could do is the town has this huge parcel on Spring Bars Road that could have been developed into hundreds of units. But we could actually, the town could transfer those development rights to some of these areas, and that would allow, right now we have a zoning that allows 6 units, housing units per acre. You can have mixed use, you can have shopping in the ground floor, but only 6 units per acre. That's one reason why we have a housing problem in this town. We don't have the right density. In order to solve our problems in our town, if we build any housing, it has to, one of the things we became clear, we can't afford to build $40 million sewer systems to run sewers out to further areas from the town. We already have sewers in our main corridors. This area is already covered by sewer. So if we are going to have greater density, this part of town is where it needs to be. So I guess I'd like to open up for questions from any members of the planning board first. Any comments or discussions? John, we'll start with you on the far end, who's also a stakeholder. He's actually a property owner in this area.
I am a property owner, and the Cape Cod Commission did present a really far vision plan, and you explained it pretty well in a brief period of time. And the thought of having some parks and instead of parking lots is enticing to anybody that owns property in that Davis Straits area. And I think over time, as people start to understand what this plan can bring not only to the town but to the property owners, it's going to be well received.
Paul, you have any comments?
Yeah, I have 2 comments. One is this public hearing was published and it was posted in Town Hall, and letters were sent to all the property owners along Davis Straits with individual letters to each of them. It's a tough time for them to come, apparently, but we made an effort to have a lot of people get involved in this discussion, but this is the first of many.
Yeah, that's the key. This is just the beginning. This is we will have, first of all, the way the process goes, before any zoning changes or anything happen, there's a whole series of meetings that happen. That this is just a visioning plan. This is just an outreach. We're looking for what first the stakeholders want, and then the town would like to see, and then we start working on making changes. And there'll be, over the next 10 years, there'll be probably 10 or 15 different meetings with a lot more specifics coming forward.
The other comment is this report is very well done. There's a lot of good concepts in there. It fits in with the local comprehensive plan. I would encourage anyone to read this because the ideas are really pretty profound, and it would help improve the quality of life in Falmouth for a long period of time. So I encourage everyone to read that.
Pat?
I also want to point out that one of the reasons that it is so focused on how we can better it is that the commission spent time at a meeting, or at least one that I can recall, with a lot of people from town who did attend it to do the visioning as to what we would like to see, not just the planning board, but the town along that main street. And this is where they came up with the potential for form-based zoning. It's a different concept. It's not a foreign concept, and it is something that the state is trying to emphasize. So that came out of it. The idea, too, that we wanted, that the plaza was ripe for redevelopment. And if we don't do something such as this, so they really paid a lot of attention to detail, we would get what we got, whatever it happened to be. So our vision along the plaza was to do smaller buildings, cut-throughs, potentially like the little stage in downtown where performances can happen, so that it became a draw for people and families to go there and to socialize. A lot of that was based upon the success of the Main Street redevelopment. It used to be really dead after summer. And as you can see now, how lively it is, all the way through the Christmas season into January until we get blizzards with 3 feet of snow and stuff like that. There is always something going on Main Street, and it's very populated year-round. So that also was an impetus for this design.
Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up one other point. This report done by the Cape Cod Commission was very well done, and the graphic on the screen here shows the intersection of Davis Straits, Main Street, and Falmouth Heights Road. Now, another study was done by McMahon Associates, a transportation master plan that was done earlier this year, and they had recommended that roundabout or rotary at that area. And that's probably going to happen a lot sooner than the area we're talking about.
Brian, what is the target date for this change? That's in the planning stages right now, is not? 3 years. So this is going to be the first piece of this development. It'll be a major change. This is Falmouth Heights Road, Davis Straits, and Main Street. This is going to be a significant change to the traffic flow in our town. And this is also going to be the other end of Main Street right here. And what this plan is trying to do is put enough interest and beauty of how our town is on both ends of Main Street, and not just turn it into a giant parking area right now. So I think if you take the time to actually think about this area, all this area in green right now presently is in the floodplain. In the last storm we had, it wasn't even a storm surge. I don't know, in my lifetime, I've seen this area flood 10 times to up to 6 feet of water. And only one of those was during a hurricane. It happens during regular storms. So logic says maybe we shouldn't be building so much in those areas. Yes?
I think it's important for people who are first looking at this plan, because it's a big, complicated plan with a lot of ideas in it, to realize that it's predicated on change over a 50-year period.
Absolutely.
And the two huge changes are going to be climate change. It is changing. Anyone who saw the recent flood downtown near Gus Canty Center knows it's changing faster than we thought it would. They may not know that that was a waterway, that it connected Morse Pond down to the harbor, that was all a watery area, and it's returning to that faster. The other huge change the plan addresses is a commercial change. Big box stores are becoming vacant all over the country, and they're being repurposed in different places, and they're being torn down in different places. And the biggest changes proposed in this plan are in anticipation of that change coming to us and what we might be able to do with it to make that area go from being a low yield per acre tax area to a high yield per acre tax area. Because one of their findings, big finding in this, is you might not think about it. If you think about where Staples and Christmas Tree and Cappy's, you think, wow, big bucks. But no, the higher yield area is where the smaller places are. Isn't that startling? And this plan says that. And it builds on that true nature of our tax base to try to bring it to this whole area. That's sort of the genesis of what this presents. And it says we can get ready for these changes, and we can make this a more beautiful place.
That is the critical point of this plan. It actually says in total the land is more valuable by doing it this way than what we presently have. Because let's face it, giant parking lots do not produce tax revenue or any benefit to anybody, and they're not all that appealing to look at. And I think the vision that we've had, as you can see, it's not all shown here, but right here, this is where the plaza is right now, and this is not, up here, it doesn't show, up beyond this area is nothing but paving. We're talking about being buildings right down the street with green space and pedestrian areas in front, with walkways that people would live on the second and third floor of all these buildings and want to walk in this area, play in the parks, have walkways all the way down to the harbor, connecting down with much greater density. Here's the existing Gus Canty, and here's some development in the parking lot of bringing the building forward, which is the way this area is zoned. This part of town right now is business redevelopment, and it calls for no parking. Our long-range vision for this, for East Main Street, is to move the buildings closer to the street and put all the parking in the rear. So this could be maybe like where the senior center could go, and here's a parking lot in the rear. And these are existing, some of the existing sites. They could be redeveloped. They're not the same buildings, but they show mixed use. We're anticipating that these buildings could be 2 and maybe 3 stories high, with apartments on the second floor. We have a real housing crisis in this town, and the only way we can do it is increase density, and the cost of building away from the sewer is not going to happen. We are not going to be putting another 40 million, another $80 million into sewers. We already have it right here. And so if we're going to create density, this is the area of town it should be. So we're saying, we're just moving it around. We're not building a lot more. We're taking buildings from where we don't want them and put them where we think they should be. And that's the simplistic way of looking at this plan. Yes, Pam?
This also fits into the sort of the whole sense of smart growth, where when you have public transportation that goes by and you have shopping and people can live and work where they, within a much smaller area so that they're not commuting. And everything here makes such sense to me. And when they first proposed it, and I thought, 50 years, I won't be here then. But when you break it up into smaller segments and what's going to happen first, and the idea of retail and residences and get the parking, it's abhorrent to me to see all that space, that impervious material in the runoff, where I think all the green should be in front and the parking should be in the back. And I mean, I think the potential here is just only to make Falmouth even that much more beautiful.
And one of the things we talk about is making our town more resilient if we do get hit by a Sandy or a storm. These areas here will all serve as giant shock absorbers that allow the water to come in and go out without knocking any buildings down. There'll be very little, there won't be any property damage. This is carefully laid out that these are the areas where the storm surge would come, and these are the areas where it won't come. So that's really the logic behind it. And the change in our economy, the big box stores are going away, the deliveries, Amazon, the internet is changing our world. Shopping malls around the country are being converted, being redone, made into apartments, all different kinds of uses. The giant big box stores aren't necessary anymore with the society going forward, with the internet and the deliveries and the things that are happening. So we're trying to come up with a plan that anticipates that will allow the actual use of this land. That's what this is, a land use study. How are we going to use our land? That's what the planning board does. We plan for the future and how to use our land. And we're saying this land should be used differently, that the low areas should be made parks, and the areas just outside them should be made mixed use with higher density, 2, 3 stories, maybe 4 stories in some areas. But that way, if they all have the public transportation's already here. Right now, you can right now catch a bus right here and go all the way to P-Town and back. It's already there. You can go all the way to Woods Hole and back. The transportation links are already here. The sewer links are already here. This entire area is already sewered. So that's really where this all is coming from. Well, I think I've covered everything I want to say to it. John, would you like to add up?
Mention that the vision is a good vision, but we also want the property owners to share their vision with this board. We don't want to just dictate this is what it's going to be. This meeting is about the property owners participating and telling us if they like this or they like something different, or because they do own the property currently.
Absolutely.
And that's why we had this meeting tonight, not just to show the vision, but to hear the vision also.
Well, I'm thinking that the mass mailing and public putting in the agenda didn't work, so we might have to do some more outreach. We might have to go to the bigger properties one-on-one and try to contact them and reach out. But the whole idea here is this is the beginning of our outreach to the property owners. This is just the first day. They've been invited to this meeting, they've been sent the links to this plan and how to get it, and I think we might have to tackle them one or two at a time just to get it started. But that is, I've kind of taken as my mission to move the beginning, not to finish the plan, but just the beginning of this plan, to the outreach to the property owners. And I guess they're all on vacation and enjoying themselves, but sooner or later we will get them into a meeting and get their feedback. John, where is your property that you own? He's a stakeholder here. Which one is yours?
It was in one of the pictures. It's 63 Davis Street, across from AutoZone.
Okay, so it's up a little bit further. So you actually own one of those older buildings that have the old Davis Straits buildings,
Right.
the colonial. Well, I don't the style, but there's a style there. I think that's one of the things. One of the things we've seen. I know what the responses I have. We saw an assemblage of land a few years ago where they took 8 or 10 properties, tore them all down, and created a giant CVS. They took a 9,000 square foot property and made it a 19,000 square foot property. Those are rough numbers. And they tore down 7 or 8 properties. Some of them were Falmouth type, iconic type buildings, and they built a massive retail development. If we do not plan properly, that is what's going to happen to the rest of this land. It'll be developers will get together, they'll use the existing zoning, which is B2. They'll tear down all those buildings. They'll put great big box stores into them. Those houses, some of the iconic buildings we have along Davis Straits will be gone, and we'll have Stop and Shop, CVS, other things. That's what our zoning allows for now. We need to change that. And we need to do it in a way that makes the property more valuable to the property owners, not less. And in my opinion, I think the only way to do that is greater density, a little bit higher mixed use, smaller retail on the ground floors, shops, stores. I mean, one of the things that'd be great if you live in this neighborhood, just imagine you get up in the morning, you're in your second floor apartment, you walk out, there's a coffee shop on the corner, you get a newspaper, you come back with some milk, and you're right back to your apartment. Or then you take your dog for a walk and you're down to the harbor. It becomes a place where people live and work, not just a giant parking lot. And that's really, I think, that's the vision that I actually got from working with Pat and Bob on the years we spent on the local comprehensive plan thinking about this. And that's really the genesis of this idea. It came from, okay, we have this area, most of it's in the floodplain, and most of it's nothing but parking lot. What do we want to see Falmouth look like? And if you look at this is the other end of Main Street. And if this happened, just imagine being able to walk at the entire length of Main Street and have it be shops, housing, people living, vibrant, all the way down to the town green and back again. All of it on the sewer, all of it with public transportation, shops, and the vibrancy we've created downtown. I know from the work that I do on my day job, running some of the properties on Main Street, believe me, those properties are really getting valuable. They're people, we're taking vacant second stories and putting apartments in them because people want to live there. Because when you walk down the street, they love the stores, they love the traffic. I have people that are in their 70s that have moved here from Florida that are renting a second floor apartments because they want to live downtown, visit their grandchildren, have a place, and they love to be downtown. We can create a beautiful, we've already created a beautiful downtown, and the idea is to stretch and extend it all the way up to Jones Road in the next 50 years. And that's what the real vision is here. And I actually didn't create this vision. We did it together, planning over years on the local comprehensive plan, and then we turned the Cape Cod Commission. We said, hey, this is what we'd like to do. Come back with a vision for us. And they've done the numbers, the statistics, the land values. It's all in the plan, and we encourage everybody to look at it and come back with some more feedback.
One final comment. We reached out to property owners on the area. This is a bad time of year. This is late August. It's the high season. People, particularly at restaurants, are pretty busy, so they're not going to come to a meeting like this. I think as we continue this outreach with public and with the property owners in the off-season, I think we'll get a better response. But I wouldn't interpret the paucity of turnout to a lack of interest.
No, the other thing is, if you reviewed the mailing list and saw that where these, I mean, there's I don't know the numbers, but let's say there was 100 or 75 people invited. If you read the list, there would be 15 or 20 that are local people that you know, and the rest of them are LLCs in New York, Chicago, plans all over the place. They're giant corporations, and they don't respond to it. It's just the way it is. So we want to make sure they're all on notice. They have heard it, and then we're going to be looking for a public comment on it. And is there anyone from the public that has any questions on this? Any comments? Yes. Could you step up to the microphone, please?
Hello, Peter Hargraves. I'm in Precinct 9. I know you've thought of this, but just drawing on our experience from other big projects in town recently and thinking about participation, which you're trying to drive here, it seems like it's a great vision. I love it. I saw it in the paper, I don't know, 9 months ago when the Cape Cod Commission put it out. Maybe it was a year ago. But I could see us having this same meeting 5 years from now.
Absolutely.
Until you actually reduce it to the reality of an executional plan and a timetable, some sensible models that people can look at. And I love the fact that there's already a plan for the Rotary, but maybe keying off of that, you can develop a concept for rolling it out. And I think people will get interested in a hurry. We talked about the senior center for 4 years before they got into the executional considerations. And I think just for my business life, being in R&D, the production guys always said, well, ideas are a dime a dozen. Give me a good execution. So I think this is a great idea, but how can we drive it? And I'm thinking of Mashpee Commons. I don't know what drives that place, but this could be a similar type of result with mixed use and a very attractive, to me, kind of area. So how do we drive it like that?
Well, it's really funny. For those of us that have been around a long time, I remember, was it 40 or 50 years ago? Bobby Burns was the only building, the pub, in a giant field. And they had a vision, and it took them 40 years. But look what they have. If they didn't have a vision, it wouldn't have happened. And this is the beginning of that 40-year plan. I think there are opportunities in the very near future, little steps, but right in these areas, buildings that are heavily in the floodplain and pre-existing non-conforming. That's some magic words here. There's some buildings here that are now in business redevelopment zones. There's a couple of buildings here that are probably 4,000 square foot buildings on a 5,000 square foot lot. For the 4,000 feet, they would need 220 parking spaces to actually use under the current zoning, and they have 4. Those buildings are stuck. There's nothing they can do with them. And as soon as, one of the things about zoning, and what we have on our side, when you have a pre-existing building, pre-existing non-conforming, you're only allowed to make changes up to 50% of the assessed value of the property before you have to bring it in and make it conform. So there are some property owners in this immediate area that are going to be dealing with this issue. They're in the floodplain. Right now, you can't expand a building in the floodplain. A pre-existing building, the way zoning works, you can't make the existing building any more non-conforming. So some of these people are in really tough places. They're between a rock and a hard spot. And there's going to be, I guarantee you, within the next 5 years, there'll be some things happening in this immediate area that are going to fit into this plan. It'll be the first steps that you're talking about, Peter. That the town or the CPC or somebody's going to say, okay, it's time to buy that building, maybe a small one, tear it down, turn it into a park, and the beginning of this plan is going to start right here. You will see some of these areas right here. This will be the beginning of the plan. That some of the buildings, this is, let's face it, I went down tonight and stood here at the harbor and stood here, and I'm looking at a giant hotel here, nothing but parking lots here for going back to the Island Queen. There's a huge hotel in this site here. These are mega changes that we're going to have to deal with. And the way to do it is find a way to transfer the development rights that these people have here to other areas in the area. But there are some areas, I'm not going to get specific on it other than I've already have, that these people are stuck. They can't do anything. They have these, the best example is a 4,000 square foot building on a 5,000 square foot lot. That means they have a parking spot takes around 200 feet. So they have parking for 4 cars, and they need, in order to use the building, they need parking for 20. That is what our zoning, or first it was our lack of zoning. A lot of these buildings were built before zoning, so they didn't take that into consideration. But people will be forced to the table, and you're going to see it in small steps, little steps in the beginning, but we got to have a larger plan to fit them all together. Well, that just about does it. I think I've covered everything else. Anybody else have any comments? Brian, what do you think? The planning board is excited and engaged. Bill, what else do
Planning is a marathon.
Yes.
Most good.
And this is the first mile.
There you go.
We got 25 more to go. So thank you all for coming tonight. Paul?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.